us on the program. Now, let's move beyond the politics and interrogate the economics of what we are talking about. The debate over removal of subsidy, and Atiku Abubakar said there will be a reversal of some sort on that policy. Let's talk with Dr. Muda Yusuf, who is an economist, a public policy analyst, and the founder and CEO of the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise, CPPE, is a former Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI, where he served for 13 years and as DG and 24 years overall. Dr. Yusuf, many thanks for joining us tonight on the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
The government is saying subsidy removal has strengthened the public finances. But what do those numbers really mean? And where are the gains in the prices Nigerians pay, the business they run, and ultimately the money left in the pockets of the ordinary people?
Well, Shehu, let me first have a short conversation on the whole principle of this subsidy removal. Because we have gone through this route in the past. And I'm surprised that this is coming up as a major economic discourse. We went through a regime in the petroleum downstream sector, which was riddled by massive corruption. The refineries collapsed and were not functioning for almost 2 decades. Massive smuggling, leakages, NNPC was not able to remit funds to the Federation account. We had massive forward sales of our crude. It created a massive problem even for our foreign exchange situation. So if you have gone through that kind of experience, why on earth should we at this time and age be discussing about going back to that kind of regime? I think we should elevate the level of economic discourse as we move closer to the end, because there are bigger issues. We have issues to discuss about electricity. There are issues to discuss about insecurity. We have issues of agri-productivity, industrial productivity, job creation and so on, even infrastructure. So we should elevate the level of our economic discourse to be discussing more serious and more sustainable policy propositions. Now, coming back to the point you made about the revenues and all of that. Of course, I listened to, and all of us listened to, the Minister of Finance a few days ago, where he comprehensively laid out the numbers. And what we saw from those numbers was that even the subnationals were bigger beneficiaries of this subsidy removal and the subsidy savings. Close to 60% of that went into the subnationals. Just about 40%, was to the federal. And you can see that in the way the fiscal operations of the subnationals have been. In fact, over the last few years, the subnationals were in a much better fiscal position, even than the federal. And you can see that from their budget implementation, for the kind of projects they have been implementing, for their ability, to clear areas and all of that. While even the federal itself is struggling. Because the federal government itself is also paying a huge price, even under this reform architecture. The federal government has stopped or practically, drastically reduced these waste and means finances. It is easy for the government to just issue checks to the central bank and say, okay, bring in this money. Under the previous administration, close to 5 trillion or more annually they were getting from waste and means. That has stopped practically. Then there is this exchange rate effect on the servicing of foreign debt. That has a significant impact on the financials of government. The same thing with interest payment. You also have the electricity subsidy. The minister laid out all these numbers, and they were very, very clear. But the point I will make is that correcting the distortions in the economy is much more significant beyond revenue. Because we are talking about creating an ecosystem that will allow more investment to come in, that will increase the level of investors' confidence, that will allow more jobs to be created. And we are beginning to see that in our macroeconomic numbers. I agree that these things are yet to trickle down effectively, but this is a major reform. This is like undertaking a surgery.
Let's take
This is time.
the devil is in the details, Dr. Yusuf, and let's interrogate the numbers and the figures. And let me quickly run through some of these figures so that you can make sense of it for. So because before Bola Tinubu came into power, they said the subsidy is just not sustainable. How expensive was the subsidy? Let's take a look at it. Petrol price early 2023 about 195 naira per liter. Subsidy, they say, was costing about 8.6 trillion between 2019 and 2022. Subsidy liability accumulated as of May 31, 2023 to about 3.736 trillion naira. Estimated full year subsidy bill, if retained in 2023, would have been 6.7 trillion naira. Approximately every month, we're spending about 558 billion naira on sustaining subsidy. But since the president said subsidy is gone on the 29th of May 2023, that escalated and escalated badly on the baseline of the economics of the average person. And see what it meant. Roughly, the petrol price jumped from 195 naira to between 488 and 557 naira per liter, depending on the location where you are buying it. That's about 150% to 185% in the immediate increase in pump price when President Tinubu made that decision. By October of 2024, you could buy petrol at 998 naira per liter in Lagos. In Abuja, you could buy it as high as 1,030 naira per liter. But if you look at the comparison, you see that the prices have jumped. There is an implication directly on from the decision of the government and the statement of President Bola Tinubu to the bottom line. The prices, the commodities increase, just everything skyrocketed. But if you look at it further, there is an important twist to all of this. Subsidy did not just disappear immediately, Dr. Muda. If you look at it, there are a lot of things that happen where people will be asking the question, how much has Nigeria actually saved? The minister was talking about 15.8 trillion naira. It's not as if that money is sitting anywhere. There's a misconception in the breakdown, as 90 will also analyze further to let us know that the federal government got about 5.4 trillion naira, state government got 6.5 trillion naira, local government got 3.8 trillion naira. But are these monies really affected or impacted positively on the lives of the average person? What happened to the state's money? Where is the money? 90 will say that federal government allocation increased about 16.8%. State got increased by about 30%, local government 26.2%. But where do the federal government's money go? And that's where you will find where they paid subsidy savings of 5.4 trillion, other incremental revenue 3.12 trillion, additional borrowing 11.85 trillion. But the fundamental here is that in all of these monies and in all of this back and forth, is the average person and how it has cost the average person food on the table, money in the pocket, increase in cost of fuel that affected the issues relating to transportation and the headline inflation. Make sense of this money for us, because if the average person cannot say I benefited and they keep suffering, the poverty rate is up. The hungry in the index is still very high, meaning that more people are hungry under Bola Tinubu, and we say we have more money, yet we are borrowing more. Make sense of these figures for us.
Now, Shehu, with due respect, that's a very simplistic way of looking at these issues. There are two main objectives of what the government had done, without holding brief for them. The first is the revenue objective, that to stop the leakages and the bleeding that arose from the subsidy regime. But the second and the more important thing is to correct the distortions and make sure that we have a very sound macroeconomic fundamentals. You cannot do something or nothing. Our macroeconomic fundamentals were already collapsing. If, as at the inception of this administration, net foreign reserve was about $3 billion. Do you know the implication of that? If that information has gotten out of the government, exchange rate could have been running to maybe 5,000 or so to the dollar. And we had a situation where our external sector had collapsed almost completely. At least when I was in the chamber, at least during that period, the letters of credit by companies were being rejected abroad. It was as bad as that. And the letter of credit is supposed to give confidence to our trading partners. They were being rejected because there was no liquidity in the foreign exchange market anymore. If businesses requested for $100,000, they'll be lucky to get $10,000. They will be on queue for several months. Many of them had to now resort to the black market. If you wanted to do business abroad, they were asking for cash because they have lost confidence in our international trade system, in our letters of credit. That was when the airline said they were no longer coming here because all the naira they got, they could not convert it to dollars. That is when our naira card, you could not use it abroad. These are bigger issues. If the economy had continued on that trajectory, the whole system would have collapsed. That is the better way to look at it. Not to just look at this simplistically.
What is the hope of the average person? Because economics, as we know it, is a better life, better welfare for not only for the average person, for the government itself, because the government has to be able to have a good condition to be able to operate and coordinate the lives of the average person. But if the average person says our lives are not getting any better, how long do you think an average Nigerian should be able to keep hope in the mix of
a major reform is a journey. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's like a patient that is about to die that will take for a surgery. The surgery process will be very painful. The recovery process will be painful. But you cannot compare the economic condition today with what you had in the second half of 2023 or what we had in 2024. Has there not been an improvement? We have our reserves now at about $52 billion. And let me also say this. Because the reform has impacted significantly more on the state revenues, we expect the subnationals to do a lot more in addressing these poverty issues. Some of them, their budgets has increased by almost 500%, some by 400% over the last 4 years. Even if you discount for inflation, because I heard the last speaker talking about the value of money, even if you discount for inflation, those are still huge numbers in terms of increases. So there has to be a lot more engagement, even at the subnational. I'm not saying that there are no issues at the federal. But we have to have more engagement.
Give me a moment, because when we come back, I'd like you to conclude on what lessons should the average person take home from all of this, whether or not if this policy is correct and how they need to relate with it, their expectations, and how to manage their pocket going forward. Well, we need to take this break, and I'll come back to you so that we can conclude the conversation. So much, everyone. Upon some of these policies and some of these actions, Dr. Muda, Yusuf, give us an understanding. A lot of Nigerians will want to make their decision on who to vote for, where to cast their vote, and how they should go. In your own sense, I'm not asking you to say Tinubu is the right person to vote for, Atiku is the right person to vote for. But in terms of the argument on this policy, where do you think Nigerians should put their sensibility? Because you are the expert here. Where do you think serves the interest of the average person?
Well, knowing what we know about the nature of the previous policy regimes, particularly this fuel subsidy and even the exchange rate subsidy, we should be more focused on the current reforms. This is not the kind of reform anybody should be contemplating of reversing. I'm not saying the reform is perfect, certainly not. It can be fine-tuned, the implementation can be better, particularly from the point of view of mitigating the social costs and maybe the economic cost of these reforms. But sustaining the reform trajectory is extremely very, very important, and it is not something that we should politicize at all. Because if we do so, it will create more problems for this economy. It will send very terrible signals to investors, and it will not be good for the economy at all. And we must also continuously know that this is a federation. The federal government cannot solve all the problems. The federal problem, of course, has a lot to do, but the subnationals have a lot more to do in dealing with basic things like rural roads, agriculture, food supply, primary health, education, and things like that. So we should hold them equally accountable. I think that is very important.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Dr. Muda Yusuf is an economist and the CEO of CPPE. Thank you so much indeed for your time and the expert opinion you have shared with us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.